Two residents of Wallace, North Carolina, who were featured in 3 Carolina Journal stories earlier this year, are now heading to prison. A federal judge has sentenced the couple for operating a scheme to collect fraudulent federal income tax refunds. But prison is just the beginning for the couple. Carolina Journal's editor-in-chief, Rick Henderson, is here with the story. Rick, welcome back.
Thank you, Donna.
So these folks are going to the federal pokey, as we put it, for how long?
The husband, Perfecto Ruano is his name, is going to prison for 57 months, or has a 57-month term, and his wife, Walda Luna, has an 81-month term.
These are serious prison sentences.
Yes,
here.
they are. They're very serious prison sentences. Also, there's a financial penalty involved. They have been ordered to forfeit more than $1.8 million in cash that was discovered in their car when they were involved in a traffic stop in Arkansas.
And we will get to that portion of the story in a moment.
Plus 4 parcels of property that they own in Duplin County, and $3 million of restitution. And the U.S. Attorney's Office press release wasn't clear if that $3 million also encompasses that cash and property, or if that's in addition to the cash and property.
It sounds as if they are wealthy people, and obviously some of this, according to the court, coming from this scheme that they were involved in. Did they appear to be a wealthy couple in Wallace, North Carolina?
No, they lived in a very standard middle-class home in a little country subdivision there in Wallace. They owned a small convenience store, but no, they were not wealthy at all. They generated their wealth by defrauding the taxpayers of the United States.
Carolina Journal has been reporting on this type of fraud for a number of months, more than a year now. And in fact, this couple from Wallace, North Carolina was featured in 3 stories. Why? What got Carolina Journal onto this couple?
Well, we learned about the couple because of an action that was filed that involved a large number of fraudulent tax returns that were done, what was once known as stolen identity refund fraud, which we've reported about for a couple of years now at CJ. It's now called taxpayer identity fraud. It's what now the IRS terms it as, and it's a multi-billion-dollar a year problem. And we learned about this couple from information that there was about to be an indictment of the couple. That what they had essentially done was fill out fake tax forms, income tax returns, from people who did not exist. They had invented taxpayer identification numbers or social security numbers for these people, had filled out returns claiming that they were owed earned income tax credits, and then used 5 post office boxes in Wallace to collect several thousand checks. And then they also, in that convenience store, happened to have a license to be a check cashing service.
Yeah, convenient.
So, yes, indeed.
A really convenient
Very
convenient
convenient store. So they were able to launder that money effectively through their own convenience store, and also take off a share of that as a fee. So that became instant cash for them. And when the IRS learned about this, then they immediately took care of this. But the IRS found out about it from the traffic stop.
Interesting. Now tell us about the traffic stop that ended up, now this couple going to prison.
They were driving toward Los Angeles to apparently deliver some cash to relatives there. And they were just a routine traffic stop in Arkansas. And I mean, I'm guessing the bundles of currency must have been visible in the back seat or something. That's the only way I could figure that there would be suspicion of that.
Cop.
Well, yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I guess $2 million in cash, because I mean, it would be the old classic, has to be in small
unmarked bills.
Unmarked bills, because if you think about it, if you're dealing with the banking system and you make deposits of several $1,000s, if the deposit's more than $10,000, it has to be reported. But even if you make series of deposits of several $1,000s, that will draw banking officials' attention. And so they probably had to make sure that these transactions were done spaced apart and done in smaller amounts than normal. And so that probably meant they did carry a large amount of cash with them.
You know, we chuckle about this, but obviously it's very serious. And you talk about someone being tipped off. Well, it was this traffic stop. But Rick, wouldn't, for example, the post office think something was amiss if people were getting all sorts of checks from the Internal Revenue Service Or wouldn't the bank be tipped off if there were all of these deposits or fake ID numbers? It seems like all sorts of different government agencies should have been tipped off.
Well, right now, we don't know what the post office had to say about this, because the post office basically has just let this go by, and we haven't had any kind of information from the post office there, because I'm imagining they don't get a large volume of mail
Right.
at Wallace. But what we do know is that the IRS is under an incredible amount of pressure to issue refund checks as quickly as possible, because people like to get their money back when they fill out their tax returns. And so the IRS has not required there to be verification that a person who is requesting a tax refund have any kind of record of filing in previous years, for instance. There's no third-party verification that a person who is filing for an income tax refund actually exists.
That's an incredible statement. So, and I think many of our listeners will be surprised by that.
That's why taxpayer identity fraud is such a big deal, because what happens is people file their tax returns. They file their tax returns as soon as they get their W-2 forms, which has to be by the end of January. They go to they file electronically, or they mail in their tax return, and the refund usually comes within a matter of a few weeks. And it's only at the end of March that these things have to be cross-checked. So by then, if you're running a scheme like this and you're doing it not on such a large scale but on a smaller scale, it's quite possible to collect tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent refunds and then disappear before anybody can actually verify that this is happening. People often do this, say, with companies that deal with a lot of temporary labor, such as construction firms and things like this. They'll find a company that hires lots of seasonal or temporary workers. They'll get that company's taxpayer identification number and then use that as the basis for filing fraudulent returns. And the company quite often is completely innocent in this case. But in the instance of Ruano and Luna, in this particular instance, this was a scheme that was set up in whole cloth just by them.
Let's presume that they're going to be serving their federal prison sentence, complete their terms. What happens to them when they get out of prison? Well,
Ms. Luna is not a legal resident of the United States, and so she will be subject to be deported at the time that her prison term is over. Mr. Ruano is a legal resident, but as I say, and they also have children as well in the U.S., but there's likely to be a deportation hearing and sentencing at that point too.
Rick, do we have any idea how prevalent this type of theft is?
The IRS has called it the #1 tax fraud problem in the country, and there are estimates of anywhere from $5 to $10 billion a year worth of fraud that takes place like this. As I say, most of these are small-time operations involving a dozen or so, but this was a massive one involving hundreds, if not thousands, of fraudulent returns. $12 million was the total that was found by the IRS. That's just what they discovered.
Just incredible. And of course, you can read the story about the federal prison sentence, and the stories are there as well. We've linked them for you if you want to read the background on how Carolina Journal has been reporting not only on this couple and the allegations against them, going back months and months and months, but this problem in general. You can read it all at carolinajournal.com.